Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
My brother Rick didn't even have the decency to call me himself. He sent a damn group text. I was already halfway through wrapping gifts when my phone buzzed, and I remember smiling, thinking maybe they were finally planning ahead for once. But the message wasn't an invite or even a plan. It was 3 sentences, dry as toast, tossed into the group chat like I was just another name on a list. Hey folks, this year Christmas dinner is going to be just for close family, people who've really built something for themselves. Keeping it small, hope you understand. At first, I blinked, confused, reading the text 3 times like I'd missed a joke. Then I realized it wasn't a joke. It was aimed directly at me. Not subtle, not clever, just a coward's way of saying, you don't belong here anymore. And the worst part? Not one damn person responded. Not my mom. Not Danielle, Rick's perfectly Botoxed wife who once begged me to co-sign a loan. Not even my nephew Mason, who I'd slipped $50 to every birthday since he turned 10. I stared at my living room, the little stack of gifts under the fake tree I never admitted was fake, the half-drunk mug of cocoa on the windowsill, the candles flickering like they didn't know the world had just shifted. I should have been angry. I should have called and demanded an explanation. But all I did was laugh, not loud, not long, just that strange breathy chuckle people make when something hurts so deeply it circles back around to comedy. You ever have one of those moments where something breaks, but so cleanly you almost don't feel it at first? That was it for me. Rick didn't just uninvite me, he defined me. Right there in that message, he summed up everything he thought I was: single, childless, alone, and therefore somehow incomplete. And when no one objected, when Mom didn't say a word in my defense, I knew it wasn't just Rick who saw me that way. They all did. I walked into my kitchen, phone still in hand, and poured the rest of the cocoa down the drain. My hands were steady, my breath calm, but inside my chest something was smoldering, something old, something patient, something that had been waiting for just the right moment. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I always thought I'd fall apart if they ever turned on me like that. But instead, I went to the couch, pulled out my laptop, and opened the folder I hadn't looked at in months: family expenses. There it was, neatly color-coded, every bill I paid, every favor I did, every quiet sacrifice I made while Rick played entrepreneur with his useless podcast and Mom sat in her recliner watching reruns of game shows. Do you know what it feels like to realize you've been the damn scaffolding for people who spit in your face the moment they think the building's done? For the past 6 years, I'd been paying Rick's mortgage shortfall every 3rd month. I'd covered 2 braces plans, a used SUV down payment, and bailed them out when Danielle's boutique store, that never turned a profit, tanked. And not once, not one single time, did I get a thank you card, a dinner, even a phone call of gratitude. Hell, on Rick's birthday last year, I sent a check for $200. He texted back, cool, T-checks. That was it. And you want to know the really twisted part? I kept doing it. Because deep down, I thought it would earn me something. Respect. Appreciation. Maybe even love. Like if I just gave enough, they'd stop seeing me as the family's barren ATM machine and start seeing me as their sister, their daughter, their person. Instead, I got a text saying I hadn't made anything of myself. I opened my banking app, scrolled past the usual tabs, stared at the list of automatic payments, all of them set up in my name, linked to my cards, quietly withdrawn month after month. I clicked edit on the house payment, then the insurance plan, then the tuition top-off I'd agreed to cover for Mason. One by one, I toggled them off. Each click felt like a string being cut, not with anger, but with precision. Like I was finally excising something rotten that had been festering in me for years. By the time I was done, the living room was dark, the candles burned low. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. I leaned back against the couch cushions, phone still in hand, and said out loud, to no one, you don't want me at your table? Fine. But don't ask me to keep paying for the damn chairs. And right there, just as the silence settled back in, I refreshed my app one more time and started counting. The first time I sent them money, I did it without a second thought because Mom called crying that Rick was behind on the mortgage again and the bank had sent a final notice, and Rick was too proud, or maybe too lazy, to ask me himself. So she did what she always did and softened it with guilt instead of gratitude. "You know how hard it is for him," she said, voice trembling like I didn't know that already, like I hadn't spent my entire 20s watching him bounce from idea to idea while I picked up the pieces he left behind. I was 34 the first time I wired money directly to Rick's mortgage lender, and I still remember the name of the agent who answered the phone, Janice, with the raspy smoker's voice and fake cheer. Like she knew I wasn't the homeowner, but also didn't care because the payment went through. I covered the gap, 3 months overdue, plus late fees, and Rick didn't even call to say thank you. I found out it worked when Mom texted me, "All set, thanks honey," and then followed it with a photo of their Christmas tree like everything was back to normal. I didn't say a word. I just screenshotted the receipt and dropped it into a folder titled Family. That folder would grow bigger than my work projects over the next 10 years. I never wanted to be the rich one in the family, not because I'm ashamed of what I built, but because I knew exactly what it would turn me into in their eyes, a resource, not a person. I worked like hell for what I have. I started in customer support at a software firm, took night classes in Python, built back-end systems until my eyes burned, and clawed my way into tech consulting with no mentor, no spouse, no fallback plan. And every time I hit a new income bracket, someone from the family found a way to need something, not want, not ask for politely, but need, as if I owed it to them just for existing in their orbit. Over 10 years, I paid Rick's mortgage shortfall at least 17 times. That's not a guess. I kept track. 17 wire transfers, ranging from a couple hundred to over $1,000, each one followed by radio silence or the occasional, "You de best" text if I was lucky. I covered orthodontist bills when his kids needed braces, both of them because he didn't believe in dental insurance and Danielle's influencer brand hadn't taken off. I paid for Mom's prescriptions every month for almost 5 years, not because she asked, but because the pharmacy kept calling me directly. At some point, I just put my card on file and stopped questioning why. One Christmas, Rick showed up at dinner in a brand new leather jacket and handed out scratch tickets as gifts, and I remember sitting there, smiling like everyone else, while doing the math in my head of how much I'd wired that year. In the last 5 years alone, I'd sent them close to $1,500 every single month. That's almost $10,000 total. And do you know what Rick gave me that year? A half-burned candle and a joke about how I could use it during a blackout, since you live alone and all. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But inside, something turned cold. I never said no because I didn't want to be the selfish one. That's the title they'd hung over my head since I was a teenager, the ambitious one, the one who didn't care about family, the one who missed baby showers because of client meetings and never stayed long at holidays because of flights. What they never saw was how hard I worked to stay connected at all. How many Sundays I spent on FaceTime with Mom instead of going on dates. How often I skipped vacations to make sure their tuition or rent got paid. I gave until I felt hollow. I gave because I thought that's what family was supposed to mean. But that Christmas uninvite? That text message? That wasn't just a door slamming in my face. It was years of quiet taking crystallized into a single, dismissive sentence. Christmas is for people who've made something of themselves. As if I hadn't been the one keeping their version of success afloat all along. So I opened that folder again. The receipts. The transaction records. The call logs. I scrolled through them one by one like I was reading a biography of someone else's life. A fool, maybe. A woman so desperate to be loved that she bankrolled her own rejection. And then I picked up the phone. Called the only person I trusted with my money. "Hi, Susan," I said, already knowing exactly what I needed to do. Turn off the faucet. I didn't scream, and I didn't rant, and I didn't give them the satisfaction of $1,000, dramatic confrontation that would have let them twist this into one more reason to call me ungrateful. Instead, I became what they always pretended I was: cold, distant, and surgical in my decisions. But this time, it was on purpose. This time, it was all by design. There were no warning shots, no cryptic posts, no sudden sobbing phone calls. I simply vanished, not in body, but in function. I disappeared from their ecosystem like an unplugged power source, one connection at a time. The first thing I did was pull my name off the house deed. I wasn't even supposed to be on it in the first place, but a few years back, when Rick couldn't qualify for a refinance without a co-signer, guess who stepped in to keep his credit score from tanking? I had signed papers from my hotel room in Phoenix in the middle of a client pitch because Rick was in a jam and promised it would only be temporary. That temporary turned into 5 years, and not once did he mention taking my name off once things stabilized. So I called the mortgage company, explained the situation, and began the legal process of removing myself from the liability. That move alone would have made most people panic, but Rick didn't even notice. Next was the car. Technically, it wasn't mine, but the registration and the insurance sure were. Danielle had needed a reliable mom car after the twins outgrew their booster seats, and she swore they'd handle the monthly payments as long as I could just help them get approved. I agreed, like an idiot, assuming they'd take responsibility once the car was in their driveway. 2 years later, not one payment had come from their account. It had all come from mine, silently and steadily, as if the thing were parked in my garage instead of theirs. So I stopped. I canceled the insurance. I called the DMV. I pulled every thread that connected that vehicle to me, and when I got the renewal bill in the mail a week later, I mailed it to them with a yellow sticky note that said, "You drive it, you own it." Then came the tuition payments. Mason had just started college, and they'd asked me if I could help with the difference between his scholarships and the out-of-state fees. The word help in my family always meant, "You'll pay this, right?" And like a sucker, I said yes. It was only a few $100 a month, they said, and besides, wasn't it an investment in the future of the family? Well, I was done investing. I logged into the bursar's office portal and removed my payment method, cold and quiet. Let Rick and Danielle explain to their son why he suddenly had a late fee on his student account. Let them be the ones to take the call from the school this time. And then, my personal favorite, I killed the phone plan. They never knew I was paying for it. Not really. It started innocently enough. Mom's phone broke. She couldn't afford a new one, so I added her to my plan. Then Rick's phone was acting up, so I sent him an old iPhone and added him too. Danielle wanted to sync the kids' tablets, so I bumped the data. Over time, I had 6 lines on my account, and only one of them was mine. It cost me over $300 a month, and no one ever said a damn word. I was just the invisible wireless genie in the sky. Until I shut it off. No calls. No texts. Just silence. It took 3 days before the first signs of trouble started to surface. Rick's podcast episode cut out halfway through because his mic lost power. Turns out the bill hadn't been paid. Danielle posted a furious Instagram story about technical difficulties during her makeup tutorial live stream. Mom couldn't call her pharmacy because her line had been deactivated. And still, no one called me directly. Not to check in. Not to ask what was going on. Not even to yell. It was like they couldn't bring themselves to admit they needed me in the first place. Pride is a funny thing. It'll make people sit in the dark just to avoid flipping the switch themselves. But pride has limits. And theirs finally cracked on a Thursday morning when I got a message from Danielle, short, clipped, and dripping with that passive-aggressive sweetness she always used when she wanted something. "Hey, did you forget to pay the water again?" I stared at the message for a long time. I could feel the old reflex rising, the urge to apologize, to explain, to jump into problem-solving mode and fix everything so they wouldn't be uncomfortable for one single moment. But that woman, the fixer, the ever-reliable Jenna? She was gone now. She'd been erased the moment they decided she wasn't worth a plate at the Christmas table. So I typed out 4 words. No emojis. No punctuation. Just truth, distilled to its most basic form. No, I didn't forget. I had just gotten out of the shower and was still wrapped in a towel when I heard the banging on my door. Not a knock, not the usual half-assed, "Hey, it's me" tap of someone trying to be polite. This was the kind of pounding that tells you someone's about to bring a storm inside with them. I didn't even need to look through the peephole. I already knew it was Rick, and judging by the rhythm of his fists on my door, he wasn't here to talk. He was here to explode. I opened the door just enough to block most of my apartment with my shoulder, but it didn't matter. He pushed past me like I was nothing more than a speed bump, eyes wild and bloodshot, shirt wrinkled and untucked like he hadn't even paused to get dressed properly before driving over. His face was already red, the vein in his forehead pulsing like a cartoon bomb about to go off, and before I could ask what the hell he thought he was doing, he turned on me with a fury I hadn't seen since we were kids, and I accidentally broke his guitar. Only this time, he wasn't yelling about a toy. He was yelling about me. "You don't just get to cut me off like some goddamn sugar daddy gone cold," he shouted, his voice echoing against the concrete of my high-rise walls, loud enough that I was sure my neighbors were hearing every word through their doors. "You think you can just turn off the cash flow like it's a Netflix trial? You're out of your damn mind, Jenna." I didn't flinch, not physically. But something inside me recoiled, not out of guilt, not even shame, but from the sheer ugliness of hearing him reduce a decade of sacrifice and silent support to nothing more than cash flow. Like I'd been running some kind of private charity he was entitled to, and I'd just gotten bored of playing philanthropist. "You weren't supposed to rely on it forever," I said, my voice calm in a way that only made him angrier. "It was supposed to help you get back on your feet. That was the idea, remember." Rick laughed, not a real laugh, but that mocking, choking kind of laugh that people spit out when they feel the control slipping out of their hands. "Back on my feet? You've been holding that leash for 10 damn years. Every time I started making progress, there you were, dangling some new favor, some new check, like you were buying my soul one Venmo at a time. You never once said no," I said, folding my arms to steady myself. "You never said thank you, either, but you sure knew how to send the invoice every time something went wrong in your life." And that's when the phone rang, Mom's name flashing across the screen like a ghost. I didn't want to answer, but I knew she'd just keep calling. So I picked it up, put her on speaker so she could hear the chaos she helped create, and said nothing. Her voice came through the line, soft and trembling. "Can't you two just be family again? Please? It's the holidays. You're both all I've got left." Something in that moment burned hot and fast inside me, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't say. She didn't tell Rick to apologize. She didn't acknowledge that he was standing in my living room screaming at me like a lunatic. She just did what she always did, begged for peace without holding anyone accountable for the war. I took a long breath and looked straight at Rick, letting the silence between us stretch until it was taut as piano wire. "You said I wasn't family," I said quietly, coldly, without blinking. "You said Christmas was for people who'd made something of themselves. That's when you stopped being my brother." Rick blinked, stunned for a second, but then his rage returned, boiling over as he stepped closer like he was trying to intimidate me into reversing my decisions with volume alone. "That was just a joke," he shouted, spittle flying, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "God, Jenna, you're so damn sensitive. It was just a joke. You think you can throw away everything over one stupid comment?" I narrowed my eyes and smiled, not a happy smile, but the kind that says you've been holding something sharp in your mouth for years and just decided to spit it out. "So was your entire career," I said, and I swear I watched something break behind his eyes when I said it. Something delicate. Something he'd been pretending wasn't already broken. He went quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned in, his voice lower now, more dangerous somehow, and said the one thing I hadn't prepared myself to hear. "I know why you paid for everything," he said, his tone like poison sugar. "It's not because you're generous. It's not because you love us. It's because you're alone. You've got no husband. No kids. No one waiting at home for you. We were all you had. And we all know it. That shut me up. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe for a few long seconds as those words sank in, because somewhere in that swamp of bitterness and projection, there was a truth I'd never said out loud. He wasn't wrong. Not completely. And he knew it. The lights in the condo were off, save for the soft amber glow of one cheap lamp in the corner and the red flicker from the digital clock on the microwave that I never bothered to reset after the last storm. The glass of wine in my hand had gone warm, untouched for the better part of an hour, not because I forgot about it, but because I couldn't bring myself to care any more about the things that used to numb me. The television was silent, the phone on airplane mode, the curtains drawn like I was hiding from something outside when the truth was, everything I was avoiding lived squarely inside my chest. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the strangest part of all. I'd expected rage to stick around, to follow me like it had for weeks, tapping at my shoulder every time I remembered one more instance of being used, one more lie wrapped in a favor, one more holiday spent smiling through teeth clenched hard enough to crack enamel. But now that Rick had screamed his truth and Mom had stayed silent and Danielle had gone back to curating the perfect holiday on Instagram, I was just empty. Not broken, not even sad. Just hollowed out like a house finally gutted of all its termites. My hands, steady now, traced the rim of the wine glass while the city lights blinked beyond the windows like some distant constellation I could never reach. I kept thinking about what Rick said, not the yelling, not the accusation, not even the sneering insult about my life being incomplete, but the one part he'd gotten right without realizing how right it was. I had needed them. Not in the way they believed. Not out of desperation or loneliness or some desperate craving for a family dinner I was never truly a part of. I needed them because I'd built my identity around being useful to them, around being the one they could lean on, the one who stepped in when no one else did, and in return, I thought maybe they'd see me as something more than just a wallet with a heartbeat. But they never did. And I suppose it all started with Dad's death, though I didn't know it at the time. I was 17 when he passed. Rick was already out of the house by then, already messing around with get-rich-quick schemes and dating girls who wore too much eyeliner and said things like, "I'm spiritual, not religious." I remember the night it happened in strange fragments, the smell of hospital antiseptic clinging to my jacket, the way Mom looked at me but never really saw me, the sound of our car's heater gasping in the December air like it couldn't believe what had just happened. And just like that, it was the two of us, Mom and me, with Rick showing up only when he needed gas money or a place to crash for a weekend that always turned into a week. Mom fell apart slowly, quietly, like wallpaper peeling off in a room no one visits anymore. And while Rick was out being reckless, I was bagging groceries after school and studying between shifts, making sure the electric bills stayed paid and the fridge wasn't just filled with condiments and leftovers from churches that dropped off food baskets. I worked 2 jobs all through college, not because I wanted to, but because someone had to. And the funny part is, I never resented it then. I thought it was what you do for family. I thought I was earning something that would bloom later, appreciation, belonging, maybe just the chance to matter. But love that's bought is never love that's real. And I know now that what I did wasn't love, not in the true sense. It was penance. For what? I'm still figuring out. I went back to Rick's house once more. Not to scream, not to make a scene, not to beg or gloat or even to say goodbye. I just wanted to see it. The place I'd helped hold together for so long without ever being allowed to call it mine. Danielle wasn't home. The kids were off somewhere. School, practice, who knows, and the front door was unlocked like always, because Rick thought deadbolts were for paranoid city types. I walked in and stood in the living room where I'd once watched Mason open the iPad I paid for, pretending it came from Santa. The walls looked smaller than I remembered. The whole place did. In the corner of the hallway, half crushed under a stack of unopened mail, was a Christmas card, my handwriting across the envelope, the loops in the J of my name still familiar, still too hopeful. It had never been opened. The year was 3 years ago. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the flap, then left it on the kitchen counter without bothering to read what I'd written inside. I took a sticky note from the fridge, the kind Danielle used to leave passive-aggressive reminders about buying organic or putting the milk cap on tighter, and I wrote one sentence in block letters, plain and unapologetic. You always said Christmas was for people who made something of themselves. I finally listened, and then I walked out, shutting the door behind me gently, not slamming it, not marking the moment with sound or spectacle. Because what needed to be said had already been said. Maybe not in words, but in the silence that followed everything I stopped doing. I don't know if I did the right thing. I still wonder if I should have handled it differently, if cutting people off, no matter how toxic, is ever really as clean as it feels in the moment. There are days I still look at my phone, half expecting to see a message from Mom, or even from Rick, something that sounds like accountability, like an apology, like a real bridge instead of another demand disguised as love. But this year, I didn't go to Christmas. I stayed home. The condo was quiet. The wine was cheap. The snow, what little we get in Austin, never fell. And the silence was the loudest thing I've ever heard.